I was so glad I drank before I started. Okay, stop transcription. Right, let's do this and let me be all professional. So, guys, we are looking at sustainability. We haven't done it together, am I right? We did assignment, we did learning unit one, we're doing a sustainability tonight. Is that correct, everyone? Someone help me? Okay, thanks, Fazine. So I sent out a request for you guys to do a bit of pre-work. Now, I'm never going to penalize people because they've not done pre-work because it's homework. For me, there's so much pressure on you. Most of you are working, so I'm not going to be that person that fusses too much about that stuff. However, I did ask people to go and look at what companies have done in response to Donald Trump's insanity. Did anyone get a chance to do a search from that perspective? Has no one done it? I'm crying on the inside right now, guys. I mean, in particular, from a sustainability perspective, this individual has reversed absolutely every single thing that Joe Biden would have put in place to protect the natural environment. I mean, it's this idea of drill, baby, drill. He wants carbons. He doesn't believe in climate change. He once said, "Where is your global warming? It's cold outside, but when you're a buffoon." Go 10%. I don't, for me, it's 10% either way. So as long as you're within 10%, whatever the maximum is, they tell you. 2,500 is more than enough to answer this assignment. Hi, Ristine.
Hi, I did do some reading into what companies have been doing in response to the Trump administration putting in so many restrictions, the tariffs, and as well as rolling back on a few of, let's say, basic human rights.
Yes.
Um, uh, all I could say is from doing just a brief research, it is people are basically going crazy because they don't know how to respond to this properly in a way that they could still have something to fall back on because this Trump administration is very rocky, to say the least,
Yeah.
and there's no saying as to what he could do next.
Well,
So
that's it.
that's
And
what
people
I've
are
seen so far.
absolutely. I think people are so scared to offend him. Disney has cancelled all their DEI stuff. Now, DEI would be transformation in terms of our affirmative action, Employment Equity Act stuff. So, their vision is something to be the happiest place in the world. Now, I'm assuming you're the happiest place in the world as long as you fit a particular profile. So they've got rid of all their transformation things. I mean, we've seen in terms of the natural environment where people are now not concerned whatsoever around the Paris Agreement, the Kyoto Protocol from a natural environment perspective. So some companies are saying, well, let's not be green. Let's go and make use of burning coal fires, etc. And other things that are concerning. It's the human rights. It's the way people are deported. It is how they ignore judges. And if we think of what sustainability is in terms of the modern definition, we talk about the four P's: people, planet, profit, and purpose. So purpose is about governance. Profit is about your economic performance. Planet is about the natural environment. And then obviously the social component. And the social component has a lot to do with DEI and human rights and taking care of communities. So if we look at these, please have a glance at these video clips. They're very cool, and you'll see when you watch why I include those. But when we look at where we are in the world now, and this has been a wonderful update on this chapter, can I just say, the one thing I'm impressed with this textbook is how current the theories and the best practices are. I really am so impressed by this textbook. So, in terms of where organizations are at, so the purpose is always going to be included in your mission statement. But the reality is, from a sustainability perspective, the definition of sustainability, and I'm going to keep it very simple, is profits now, but done in a way that we have profits in the future. So if we harvest trees, if Sappi or Mondi harvest trees in a particular area, they're planting saplings in another area. So it's profits now, but doing it in the future. The reality, though, is when we look at the redefinition of what strategic, long-term, sustainable success is, we know that it's wealth creation for your stakeholders. So when we look at the success of the organization, we ask our customers, have we made some sort of opportunities for wealth creation for you, for suppliers, for communities, for employees, for our shareholders, the natural environment included in that as well. So in terms of the purpose, I think, first of all, we need to understand where we've been to really appreciate where we are in terms of sustainability. Now, when we go back, the first sort of comments about the role of companies within the bigger context of the world is that the only job of managers in an organization is profit, and the only duty that managers have would be to that of the shareholders. Milton Friedman was a radical free market economist. His writings are still around. This is, I would imagine, about the 1970s. And he did say the more you focused on profit, the more you'll be able to pay in terms of taxes, and government, the institution that should be trusted to take care of social things, would then use those taxes. Why can we not use that view of the world anymore? Why is that a dangerous view for organizations to use? To ignore CSR completely. If we see where we are in the world, if we look at the top 100 wealthiest economies in the world, so the top 100 wealthiest economies, 2/3 of those are big business. So out of that, 2/3, 66, give or take, are big business. The rest are countries. Apple's turnover last year was more than South Africa's GDP at the same stage. Let me say that again. Apple's turnover last year was significant, well, it was more than what South Africa's GDP is. And when you have these kinds of massive behemoth type organizations, there is this expectation that from a customer's perspective, we've made you this wealthy. You need to give back to communities. You need to look after the interest of customers. If you're an employee, the attitude is, I've worked very hard for you to make you very wealthy. So in return, I expect that I will get a decent salary, I'll get decent conditions of service, that the psychological contract that I have with you essentially will be honored. So we see how wealthy companies have become. Who is surprised by how much Apple's turnover is relative to our GDP? Is anyone surprised by that? That Apple turned over more than our GDP? And because of that, the simple truth is we expect companies to give back. Bradley, I agree with you. Well, I'm a little bit shocked, actually. So when we see where we have moved to, I think the first one is if you focus solely on the profits of an organization, you will struggle to be around. I mean, we see it in Steinhoff, where the intention of Steinhoff was very, very much to pay out dividends, to look after the top shareholders, to look after the executives, etc. And we know what happened to Steinhoff. So now we have to realize that the idea of profits now, but done in a way that will have profits in future, has become the standard. So the first thing we do when that happens is we move away from shareholders and we start talking about the stakeholders. I'm not 100% happy with this stakeholder model. There's one that's missing. But the stakeholders that Friedman and Elms note, they'll always be your customers, those that use our products and services. So we want to give quality, we want to give great service to employees, those individuals that give their time, energy, effort, their skill, that commit themselves to an organization's long-term success. We have to give them something in return. And then suppliers, and then communities. Guys, if we look at that, which stakeholder, which is not generally considered as part of the traditional stakeholder, would you add to that? Which stakeholder would you add to that? Can one person answer a question tonight? Please, just one person. Just make me feel that people are listening to me. I will give 25% extra on the first assignment for somebody who guesses something in the chat. So 25% is not enough. 35% if you make a guess. I'm giving up. Guys, I would include the natural environment there. For me, the natural environment should always be included as a key stakeholder. Be very careful that this isn't an exam or test question, an exam question. They love asking this one because it's easy to mark, it's easy to get. It's one of those freebies. Remember to NB that. In terms of the kind of stakeholders we have, primary, those that essentially have some sort of contractual relationship, are directly affected by our operations employees and those kinds of people. And then secondary, always the community. And it's important in terms of the communities because we draw our employees from the communities. We have, I live in Pietermaritzburg, and we have a place called Truda Foods. Truda Foods hire all the employees from a single community in Pietermaritzburg, and they essentially were perceived to mistreat their employees, and the community then went and cordoned them off, blocked trucks from coming in, trucks from leaving. So community is essentially important because that's where we get our employees from. So in terms of stakeholders, oh my gosh, do people love this particular question in the exam? Please NB this, guys. Please, please NB this one as well. Please look at page 56. So in terms of the idea of a stakeholder map, so your two continua, and remember this is 2.1 in the textbook. For those of you that don't have the textbook, somebody will take a picture and put it on the group. So the idea is we have those two dimensions. The first one, power, and it really is about the power relationship that exists between a particular stakeholder and the organization, and also the interest that stakeholders have. Now, if you're an employee, you have a significant interest in terms of the organization. So you can see there, you will end up with stakeholders with little or no influence, and essentially also little interest, but we need to keep an eye on them. We need to be aware of them because those stakeholders might someday become an employee or a supplier or become a customer. Yeah, high levels of interest, low power. I think the key thing there is because of the power imbalance, it is about listening, it is about understanding and keeping people informed of whatever changes we have from a policy practice perspective. And then little interest, high power. Honestly, these individuals you look after because of the power. Communities often have a big power. I mean, we see what Americans are doing in terms of Tesla. You have to make sure that you don't get negative attention from them. Tesla at the moment is an interesting place because they get attacked often. And then high interest, yeah, these are people that you spend a lot of ongoing attention to. Please NB this. It's a silly question. I don't like it, but they love asking it in an exam. Right, so why do we have to move away from Friedman? The first one is Friedman was at a time where we had half the number of people on the planet that we have now. The scary part of this is that we, in terms of pure survival, use 2 planets worth of resources. And we need 2 planets of resources to support the population in the world right now. So essentially, if we were given resources for a year from the planet that the planet can give, by June we've used our allocation up, and there are suggestions that we are moving to 2.5 in terms of those numbers. You can see in terms of food and water, and this is the scary one. Burning fossil fuels, we were turning the corner, we were going to green energy, and obviously Donald Trump struck again. Right, so I think the first thing to remember is we at this geological epoch. It is this period of time where I think unless we do something decisive as mankind at this particular point in time, we will crash over a cliff in terms of the survival of the planet. I sometimes, when I'm really cynical, believe that we have gone beyond the point of return, of no return. I think we've messed the planet so badly that in 2 or 3 generations' time, this is going to be an unpleasant place to an unpleasant place to live. Anyone else think we've gone past the point of no return, where we've messed up so badly that it's impossible to correct the wrongs from the past? Guys, can I just see, are you typing? Because I'm not seeing anyone typing. If you don't want to answer, that's absolutely fine. I'll talk to myself.
I can't see my chat, so I'm unable to type.
Okay, well, just comment. Yeah, that's fine. So, Caroline, you think we've gone beyond that point of no return? I'm concerned as well. And I think we're rushing towards a destruction of the planet. I mean, the planet, it can only survive so much. So the idea that Elon Musk will populate Mars very soon, which is also just a load of nonsense, is not so insane. Ristine, go for it.
So what I think, this may sound a bit of like a conspiracy theory, but I believe that there is a very high chance that we already might have found a way to save the planet, but because of many different corporations banking on things that are harming the planet, they're kind of gatekeeping all of those technologies that would have helped us save the planet.
I hope it's not the truth, and I don't deal with with those kinds of um, theories. But yeah, conspiracies are out there. I don't know whether that's true. I hope it's not. Okay, so yeah, I see, Sheldon, you reckon that with technology evolving, I mean, in Iceland somewhere, I think it's in Iceland, they've got this massive factory that sucks carbons out of their air and pumps it into the Earth's crust. People are moving towards hydropower, we're moving towards solar power. We see that we're finding alternative ways to generate electricity. I am really concerned, and I quite like your view. I think it's one of those kinds of views that I think we should have. But I am deeply concerned with Trump in the driving seat, that I think green energies will disappear very rapidly. If we look at some of the realities, you talk about these planetary boundaries, and essentially, these planetary boundaries, if we cross certain thresholds, it is very difficult to come back, Caroline. The first one is climate change. Now, are there any climate change deniers here? Who thinks climate change is a hoax? One of the senior managers in our varsity college tells me that there's no such thing as climate change. And in fact, the evidence shows that we have global cooling. Um, Also a massive Trump supporter. So those, I think if you're a massive Trump supporter, you talk horse manure like that. I think the evidence is significant. If you're not seeing changes along the coastline, if you're not seeing the number of storms, the intensity of storms, if you don't see how stats show that the planet is getting warmer. I always question the sanity of somebody who believes that. Guys, the second one, we see biodiversity being reduced. I mean, there's so many species of plants and animals that are at risk or have disappeared. Yeah, ozone is gone. And remember, we should have reversed that in the 90s when we got rid of CFCs in cans of spray, etc. Remember, the moment that starts depleting, the sun gets hotter, and you'll end up with, I don't know, factor 5,000 sunblock to get outside. I think what is the highest factor, and it's interesting how sunblock has evolved in line with the changes in the climate. What is the highest level factor that you can get at the moment for sunblock? Is it 100 or is there something higher than 100? I know there's 100. In my day, there was no sunblock, guys. I suppose that's also why my skin is so messed from the sun. The other one, guys, yeah, air pollution. I think the moment you move away from green energy and you think you can burn coal fires, you will mess with the planet. No, we'll be on the extra crispy side. Yeah, CO2 in the water, and we've seen the impact that it's had on coral reefs. I mean, coral reefs are dying. The other thing which is interesting is as the ocean is warming, we get jellyfish, and it really is monster jellyfish. A fish size of man. I'm going to show this picture, and I'm sure all of you have seen this before. So jellyfish love warmer oceans, and the warmer the ocean, you get abracadabra there, guys. That is real. It's not fake. It's not a hoax. And when you're like me, who swims in the ocean and loves swimming in the ocean and who reacts really badly to jellyfish, these are the things that scare the heebie-jeebies out of me. But this is grote daai, guys. These are, this is insane. And if that's not evidence, then I don't know. Okay, then I don't know. Guys, and then also, yeah, biochemical flows. I think the one thing we realize is that oceans become the dumps of the world. They're the sinks. We send everything to the ocean. Mind you, it got what Nemo back to his dad. So maybe there's some good fact that everything ends up in the ocean. Guys, and then land system change, lots of deforestation, which again is a massive issue, and land degradation as a consequence of that. South Africa is a water-poor country. The belief is that the next world war will be about resources, and I really believe that was what the war in the Ukraine was about. Russia wanted Ukraine's significant resources. And then this idea here, these modified substances or life forms, every time a layer of ice disappears, new pathogens are being added to the environment, to the atmosphere. The scary thing about that is people are considering bringing back the woolly mammoth because the woolly mammoth's coat is able to absorb some of those strange substances or life forms. Classic example, COVID. 2020, that is exactly what happened, a novel entity. The other thing that's happening is when we have the Amazon forest burned down, we're starting to expose new pathogens to the environment. The prediction is that COVID will never be our last massive pandemic. I believe the next pandemic will come from ice caps melting and deforestation. Sorry, I am very negative, Caroline. I'm so sorry. So I think the reality is we need to start looking at our natural resources and what we can do to save them. We also need to realize that, land is going to be under pressure because sea levels are rising. India, the most populous country in the world, will be underwater. Where do we accommodate people? Where do we find land to grow food? And then, yeah, as I said, it's a sink for our waste. Right, so this is the assignment question, and this is the NB one for the exam as well. I think, and I stole this from Woolworths. So if we look at the Woolworths website, this to me is possibly the single best example of what organizations can do. And please spend a bit of time here looking at what Woolworths has done to become more green, to become more sustainable, to include communities, to make communities responsible for their actions and those of others. And you can see a lot of the information here, the kind of objectives that they have. And look here, 25, we're there. Transparent, traceable supply chain, we're there. 2030, that they will not link to coal-fired stations. Net zero 2040, that includes the vehicles they use for deliveries. And then the idea of this is a social community type thing that they have. Love this. Read each of these guys. It is so difficult to find a better example than this one. So let's look at what shared value and inclusive business is. I think the first one is that we have to realize that by not being socially responsible, we are placing the organization at some sort of reputational risk. Now, there are other ways, but I think definitely reputational risk would be one. Now, what can organizations do? The first one is this idea of shared value. In the modern thinking, shared value is how do we look after the interests of our shareholders, but at the same time, how do we look after the interests of our stakeholders? So I taught the mission statement today to my face-to-face students, and I said to them, whenever you write a mission statement, you will write a mission statement that speaks equally to each one of your stakeholders. So it starts with your vision, it starts with your mission statement. And the thinking is that we now look after the full gambit of stakeholders in terms of wealth creation. The modern definition of what organizational, strategic, sustainable success is wealth creation for our stakeholders. The second one is this, where we look at people previously excluded from our supply chains, our operations, etc. So Woolworths really good in terms of their affirmative purchases processes, etc. So the first one here is how do we create the idea of shared value? The first one is about looking at your supply chain. And I think the reality is we have to become more efficient. We have to make sure that we are able to do more with less. We also look at cluster development, and I'll explain that. Oh gosh, I might have to draw, which is so awful. And we look at what can we do with our products and services, and we'll talk about bottom of the pyramid. So the first one is where we look at our supply chain and efficiencies within that supply chain. I think the first one is that we try and have a minimum impact through our supply chain. Now, you'll remember your supply chain starts at your suppliers, and I'm so sorry that I have to put you through this. But if this is the organization, remember your supply chain in terms of modern organizations is that you'll have a number of suppliers that will provide you with your inputs. There sometimes will be some sort of transformation process, and we get those to customers at the end of the line. Oh dear gosh, looks like my customer has been hit by a truck. Okay. And that's on a good day that. So the reality is all of this has to be more efficient. And how do we do that? So the first one is, and this has to go hand in hand with the cluster development, is the idea that we cluster our suppliers together so that when a truck leaves, you drive once, you go to your different suppliers, and you drive back. None of this back and forth stuff that old inefficient supply chains have done. We also know that supply chain management has become one of those key competitive advantage things for an organization. Have we got anyone who works in supply chain here? Oh gosh, my students that refuse to talk to me, I'm going to take a snapshot of you, and mine is 25% to everyone in their assignment. But so, guys, it's also about cost reduction, and it's silly things like it's silly things like installing energy efficient lighting. Factories that are worth their salt will have sensors in their boardrooms that the moment there is no one in that boardroom, the lights go off automatically. Now you might say 5 cents a day, but you add that up across thousands and thousands of factories and thousands of outlets. Those are the kinds of things that make you efficient. And then obviously starting to bring in your own solar panels. But the key thing is this thing here. You don't want to drive far. Our local supplier in Pietermaritzburg, because of foot and mouth, couldn't deliver meat for a long time. And Woolworths just apologized. They didn't go further. They waited for the supplier to get back on its feet. The second one is cluster development. I always think of how DSTV expands into a new region. DSTV, when they expand into a new region, what they'll do is they'll appoint, so if DSTV is there, if we go into a new country, they'll appoint installers across the country. Those installers would then hire people or subcontract. And what happens is you create this little economic cluster. And it is significantly beneficial, not just to DSTV because they expand their footprint, but it is also beneficial to those people that are there. So I think it's this idea that we make sure that our customers are close together, that we travel once, but also that we grow the economy where we operate. It has to do with the municipalities. It has to do with local economic development. And then just reconceiving products and markets. I always think of bottom of the pyramid. Now, bottom of the pyramid is when you do business with the poorest of the poor, but you do business in a way that tries to assist people to break poverty cycles, etc. There was a study in America, and the study looked at the people who lived in old style ghettos. And the study showed that out of the 100 people who lived amongst the poorest of the poor, the chances of breaking the poverty cycle is at a maximum 10%. So 10% of people who are part of the poorest of the poor will break the poverty cycle and be better off than their parents. 60% will be as poor as their parents. The scary thing is 30%, oh my gosh, will be worse off. Sorry, I'm writing with my mouse. 30% will be worse off. So what we see in terms of these reconceived products and services, if you can give people who are struggling entry-level tablets, all of a sudden, and with an internet connection, you have access to jobs, you have access to learning opportunities, you have access to information, you have access to price comparisons, because people who don't know prices get ripped off. So it is about breaking the poverty cycle. It's not about doing business with poor people because we can exploit them. It is about adding value to their lives. Okay, so guys, in terms of this, where is the assignment question? Is that enough? So the purpose of shared value and inclusive business is really about making the organization more efficient. It is about making sure that we connect with new customers. It is about making sure that we grow economic sectors in wherever we operate. You can describe it then. I'm not going to go into that. You guys can do your own application. Anyone want to comment on whether they are good at those two elements? Because remember, it is the first part there, are they good? And the second part is what can they do to improve? Anyone want to tell us whether you think Altvest is good with those two? Is there enough evidence? Okay, no one got there yet. All right. Now, This is the modern side of it. So all of that is wonderful, and it's where we were. And when I say it's where we were, there has been an evolution in the last 3, 4 years since this textbook, the previous edition of this textbook was written. And I quite like this because it makes a lot more sense in terms of what we do in the world now. So the first one is this new definition that shared value should give way to systems value. And it is this idea that we look at businesses differently. Now, the new way of doing it is different from the past. In terms of the past, we looked at stakeholders that were part of our lives and stakeholders that were excluded. But I sometimes thought, and the textbook indicates that we sometimes looked at the stakeholders in isolation. What the new approach is that the organization is in the middle. So the organization is always there, and the organization has certain objectives to achieve. But because we realize that we have become incredibly wealthy as a consequence, as an organization, as a consequence of communities, of employees, of customers, and those kinds of stakeholders that make a difference in terms of our supply chain. So the organization sits in the middle. Every organization is embedded within a community. So we realize if you are an organization, and you'll see when you look at Woolworths processes, they are expected to show, if you're going to be a supplier to Woolworths, that you benefit the community from your operations. You also have to show that you're financially sustainable, and that you have other resources that are being recycled, and you're sustainable from an environmental perspective. But every organization sits within the broader context of a community. It is from that community we draw our employees, our customers, etc. That community sits within the context of the broader environment. So the evolution has been that here we looked at our stakeholders separately. Now, and I love this model, I really like this interpretation, is that we have an organization in a community in the broader environment, and none of those can exist without each other. Love this idea of what sustainability is. The organization, in order to survive, has to be efficient, has to be able to compete, and all of that stuff, within the context of looking after communities who have so much power in relation to us. But we also have to look after the natural environment. Any comments about that view of what sustainability is now? And remember, here is planet and purpose. So we look at governance, and we also look at profits, the economic side. Here is the social component, the people component, and here is the natural environment component, the planet. And if you ever get stuck here and you don't know what to write, just write people, planet, profit, purpose. I have to give you marks. Maybe I'm just a nerd and get excited about these kinds of theories, guys. Well, I am a nerd. So in terms of this is this new definition of how businesses are embedded in communities and in the natural environment. So how do we do this? The first thing is we look out and after our 5 forces. We realize that 5 forces will always be there. Porter's 5 forces, the fact that we have competitors and suppliers and substitutes, etc., and buyers. And I think once we realize that those form part of this new embedded approach, we start looking at the business differently. Then what we do is you have to start looking at the environment. You have to understand from a pestle perspective, in particular, social issues, economic issues, where you are at in terms of the environment and how you have to respond to that. And then you can look at those things that will bite you later, those things that will have you end up in the newspaper and have reputational damage. And we deal with those. Now, the way that we normally would talk about it is just look at opportunities and threats, and deal with those appropriately. The next one is to understand, guys, the only way we can figure out what we want, what our stakeholders want from us, is to listen to our stakeholders. Listen to your employees, listen to regulators, listen to anyone that has a link, listen to your customers. I think the reality is that people don't pay enough attention, and all of a sudden you've lost market share. And then we look at those areas that we need to prioritize, and we relook at the way we create value. We relook at our value chain. And from there, you look at what can we do in terms of improving our impact on the natural environment, on communities, and on economic issues in terms of dividends for our shareholders. And also, guys, on dealing with this crisis of ethics that we have. I honestly believe that we have a crisis of ethics. It's almost the attitude, if government can steal, why can't we steal? I get very frustrated, and going from being a Cyril Ramaphosa fan to thinking this is a weakling, that this oak is the reason why government in South Africa is in the place where we have to add in another percentage to that. I'm having a moment. Guys, and then just set your goals and targets and start making a difference in terms of those 4 areas: people, planet, profit, purpose. And then check on whether you are progressing. So this is part of progression, is you'll get 2 kinds of changes. You'll get the sort of ongoing sort of evolutionary changes, and that you do by this Deming cycle. They use it in Nissan. It is about efficiency. The term that the Japanese use to describe it is Kaizen. So every time you make a small, ongoing, continuous improvement, it's Kaizen. If you work in a factory environment, generally every single one of the production lines and teams on production lines will be given this. They need to question on a daily basis whether they can't improve. They don't accept the status quo, and they're given a number of improvement suggestions as a target every month, a number of Kaizens. And then here, measuring and reporting on progress. You will see I shared this with you guys. That's the online one. Don't know if anyone had a chance to look at this one here. Case studies, learning unit 2. Where is it? Is it this one? The end of last year's report? No, that's the blue flag one. It's this one. My apologies. To just show you guys that we don't just teach theory here, have a glance at this. This is the Woolworths report. It mirrors what we do in terms of theory. This is possibly the best example of theory in action that I've found in a long time. I did share this on ARC. I might have stuck it on the WhatsApp group as well. Please have a look at this and compare this in relation to the other elements. And the one thing you'll see is there's mention of people in terms of communities, planet, in terms of what we've done from a natural environment perspective, and then in terms of purpose, what have we done from a governance perspective, ethics perspective, and also what have we done to make sure that we remain profitable so our shareholders will get dividends. And what I like about this particular approach is how transparent they are and how they've evolved. It is a wonderful, wonderful example of what these reports could be. It is blimmin' impressive. I don't know if anyone had a chance to glance at this when I shared it with you. If your company's report looks like this, I would suggest that you might be sustainable. And you can just see how every element is included there. And if you ever get a chance, have it in relation to here. So the idea of integrated reporting. So in the past, we used to just have financial reporting. Now we report in terms of the 4 elements: people, planet, profit, and purpose. So you'll always see that you're going to have, from an ethics perspective, the purpose, the governance part. You will look at the impact that you have in terms of the natural environment and then communities, etc. And then you include this stuff. The first one, you look at your strategic objectives, and key in terms of that is making sure that we will be around for an extended period of time, that we are focused on the future, that we're not just worried about dividends, that we will make sure that we keep our shareholders happy, but done in a way that we'll have shareholders in 20 and 30 and 40 and 50 years' time. The second one is to show how our business model essentially allows us to be sustainable, how it allows us to be efficient, how it allows us to not have a negative impact in terms of the environment and communities. Future orientation, and it's always going to say, this is where we're at, but we're not good enough. So there'll always be objectives from an improvement perspective. And then what do we do to look at the relationships with our stakeholders? All of this lives within the context of the Woolworths report, guys. And you can see it's concise, it's reliable. Please also, it is that it's not made up facts. I mean, one of the things that I should have mentioned at the beginning is that Facebook, as a consequence of Trump's actions, are now saying that with their moderators, that truth is multifold. There's not just one truth, and they have now given more leeway to the moderators to include manufactured truth. So the idea of Haitians eating cats and dogs, which was created as a made-up truth by Vance, and his argument in terms of that is, if I have to create false news to focus on the plight of Americans, I will. So he says he created the false news about Haitians eating pets to focus on the plight of Americans. I mean, it's as slimy and as dodgy as heck. I don't know if there's other more technical terms for slimy and dodgy and heck. Well, I know what the more technical term for heck is, but I won't say that. Guys, and then, yeah, how do we actually perform? I'm having a moment. I'm going to get reported, I'm sure. And then our risks and opportunities, again, very clear in the Woolworths report, our strategic objectives. And I mean, there's so much governance from an ethics, how we remunerate our board of directors, our senior managers, how we've performed relative to our previous set of objectives, and what is out there in our future. And then, guys, also the kind of things you'll include would be those kinds of capital elements. Manufactured capital, yeah, we depreciate those. The ones that appreciate are those. If you've got great intellectual capital and you build on it, it is a growing asset. Here, yeah, we know that they depreciate. Those of you that do finance can tell me more about it. If we look after growing human capital, it will appreciate. If we look after that, it will add value to the organization. This one, I think most companies claim to be carbon neutral, most lie, although I think the future people should start focusing on being carbon negative. Right, now I've said a heck of a lot. It is your turn to comment, ask questions, etc. I hate the quietness of this class. I've taken a screenshot and minus 25% to everyone here, except the people who said a little bit. That's minus 20 to you. Any questions and comments at this stage, guys? And now people are disappearing, not even saying goodbye.
All good, sir. I'm all good, my friend. All good, my friend. Thank you.
Okay, but
thanks, sir.
Guys,
good,
yeah.
sir.
Hi,
But sir, what about us that were reacting? I think we deserve like
25%
a 30%.
It's plus 25%, Fazine.
Okay, I'm recording this. Well, the class is
I'm
recorded.
still being recorded. You have an unprofessional lecturer. Pleasure, Caroline. Matthew, absolutely fine, guys. We'll see each other. I hate this every second week. Yeah. World leaders right now, I think that the Zelensky is one that stands out to me. I struggle to find other people. I think people are spineless. The kind of obsequious behavior, you guys can look up if you don't know what obsequious is, all that thing sure you do, that people have around Trump and the fear of Trump, and that diplomacy is one-sided. I hate that. I cannot find Zelensky. Zelensky essentially stands up for his country, is in the ring fighting with his soldiers, trying for his country. It has got no self-interest. I think everyone else has a self-interest, boy. Don't know whether that's a good answer, Sheldon. I don't think Zelensky does it for himself. He does it for his nation and his people. Okay. Who would you say, Sheldon, is good? I think Keir Starmer is a weakling. I think Keir Starmer is a puppet. I don't want to say a muppet, but close to that. Guys, anyone else? Right. Hopefully people listened to the recording and it wasn't too bad and too shouty and too emotional. Thanks so much, guys. Please remember, we have got that magic group that we chat on. Please look after yourself. Cheers, and Shira. Cheers, guys. I'll stay around if you have any questions and we can deal with them. I'm going to stop the recording now.
Thank you, sir.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure, Kelly.